Welcome to Walk You to Sleep. Tonight we'll walk the old streets of Edinburgh, where history is worn into the cobblestones and lanterns, cast their warm light across the stone. We'll pass through market squares and narrow closes, up to the castle rock, and back down again into the city below. Take a slow breath, and let the evening settle around you. The grass market opens up wide beneath you, a broad, low square ringed by old stone buildings, their facades lit from below by lanterns and the warm spill of pub windows. The castle rises directly above, enormous and dark against the evening sky, its rock face dropping sheer to the rooftops below. You can hear it before you fully see it. The low murmur of voices from a few outdoor tables, the scrape of a chair on stone, someone laughing inside a bar with the door propped open. A street vendor near the edge of the square is selling meat pies and mulled cider from a small cart, and the smell reaches you before you're anywhere near it. Warm pastry, pepper, something faintly sweet from the cider. You stop, you buy one, you cup it in both hands, and the heat soaks straight through. The pastry is dense and a little crumbly at the edges, and when you bite in, the minced mutton filling is peppery and rich, with a faint savoury steam that rises into the cold air. It's simple and filling, exactly what you want when the cobblestones are damp and the evening is just beginning. The grass market has been a market square since the 1400s. Cattle, horses, grain, and for a long stretch of its history, a place of public execution. There's a small memorial cross set into the stone near the centre, easy to miss if you're not looking. Tonight, most people aren't looking. They're eating, talking, tilting their heads back at the castle. Two of them catch your eye, a young couple standing near the edge of the square, shoulders almost touching. She's pointing upward at something, a lantern maybe, or a lit window high on the rock face. He's not looking where she points. He's watching her. They've just arrived, you can tell, still taking it all in, still finding their footing. You catch a few words drifting over. I didn't think it would feel like this. A pause. Like what? And then quieter. Like it's been here waiting for us. Robert Louis Stevenson, who grew up not far from here in the new town just across the valley, once wrote that Edinburgh is a city of extraordinary contrasts, where the ancient and the modern exist side by side. Standing here, with the medieval castle looming above a square full of people eating hot pies and checking their phones, it's hard to argue with him. The cider, when you get to it, is warm and faintly spiced, clove, maybe a little orange peel, and it takes the edge off the cold that's been settling in since the sun dropped. You hold the cup a moment longer than you need to. Somewhere across the square, a door swings open and a few bars of fiddle music escape before it swings shut again. Leaving the grass market behind, Victoria Street curves away in a long, sweeping arc, one of the few curved streets in Edinburgh's old town, and you feel it immediately, the way the buildings seem to lean around the bend. The shop fronts here are painted in deep, saturated colours, burgundy, forest green, a warm mustard yellow. The paint is thick and old in places, peeling slightly at the corners where the stone shows through. Each door is a different shade. It gives the whole street a stacked, layered quality, especially from below, where a lower terrace of shops sits beneath an upper walkway, and you can see people moving along the railing above, like figures on a stage. The smell changes here. Back in the grass market, it was open air and frying oil and cold stone. On Victoria Street, it's something closer, wood polish maybe, or old paper. One of the shops sells antiques, and its door is propped open. A faint mustiness drifts out, the kind that belongs to rooms full of things that haven't moved in years. A few doors down, something warmer, candle wax, and dried herbs from what looks like a small apothecary, its window crowded with amber bottles and bundles of lavender. The lanterns along the street are already lit, even though the sky above the roofline still holds a thin strip of pale grey blue. The light they cast is warm and slightly orange, and it catches the painted signs above each shop, hand-lettered most of them, in gold or white. You pass a bookshop, a kilt maker, a place selling nothing but whiskey. The windows glow. A few other people are walking the same direction, a man with a dog on a short lead, an older woman carrying a paper bag in each hand. The street is quiet enough that you can hear your own footsteps, and the faint sound of something stringed being played somewhere above, a window open on the upper level maybe, or a busker just around the bend you haven't reached yet. Just ahead, Two voices drift down from the walkway above. You catch a fragment. A woman's voice, then a man's, low and amused. You said you weren't hungry. A laugh, then quiet again. The street bends further, and the buildings on either side close in slightly, not uncomfortably, just enough that the lantern light bounces between the walls, and everything feels a little warmer than it did a moment ago. The stone is dark here, almost black in the gaps between the lit windows. You keep walking. At the top of the curve, the street opens just slightly, and you can see the arch of a narrow passage, cutting away to the right into shadow. A few steps more, and Chambers Street opens wide, after the narrow curve of Victoria Street, a different kind of space, more formal, with the long stone facade of the National Museum of Scotland running the full length of the block. The building is hard to miss. The older wing, built in the 1800s, is pale sandstone, with arched windows and carved detail along the roofline. The newer wing beside it, opened in 1998, is a different thing entirely. Curved white stone, almost sculptural, with a circular tower that rises above the street. Together they make an odd but settled pair, the way old and new sometimes do, when neither is trying too hard. You slow down here without quite deciding to. There's something about the scale of the place, the long horizontal sweep of it, the height of the entrance, that makes you take a breath. A few people are coming down the front steps, bags over shoulders, the particular unhurried look of people who've spent a few hours inside and are only now remembering the outside world. The stone underfoot is smooth and wide here, easier going than the older lanes. Your footsteps sound different, less echo, more open air. The evening is coming in slowly, the sky above Chambers Street shifting from pale blue to something cooler, and the museum's facade catches what's left of the light along its upper edges. Inside, if you went in, you'd find everything from a Pictish stone to Dolly the sheep, the first cloned mammal, preserved and displayed as if she were just another artifact of Scottish life, which in a way she is. But tonight the doors are closed, and the building stands there, solid and enormous, doing nothing in particular. You catch a few words drifting over from somewhere nearby. I thought it was free, is it free? And then the voices move on. A pigeon lands on the top step, looks around and leaves. The street is quieter than Victoria Street was. The light is different here. Around the next bend, the statue appears, and it's smaller than you expect. Greyfriars Bobby stands on a low stone plinth at the corner of Candlemaker Row, a little Skye Terrier cast in bronze, ears up, looking out toward the street. He's been here since 1873, and the nose is worn bright gold from so many hands reaching up to touch it. Yours does the same, almost without thinking. The metal is cold and smooth. The story is well known, but it still lands. Bobby belonged to a man named John Gray, a night watchman who died in 1858 and was buried in Greyfriars Kirkyard, just up the lane. Bobby refused to leave the grave. For 14 years, he kept his post, through Edinburgh winters, through rain and frost, until he died himself in 1872. The city gave him a gravestone. They gave him this statue. It's the kind of loyalty that doesn't need explaining. Somewhere nearby, a vendor is selling mulled cider from a small cart, and the smell of it drifts over. Cinnamon and clove and something faintly smoky. You get 2 cups. The paper is warm against your palms before you even take a sip, and the first taste is sweet and tart at once, with a slow heat that settles somewhere in your chest. You hold it close as you look back at the little dog. For a moment the cold doesn't reach you at all. A few other people are gathered here, a couple taking a photo, a man reading something on his phone, while his daughter tugs at his sleeve. You hear her say, "But why didn't someone just bring him home?" And the man starts to answer, and you don't catch the rest. The lanterns along Candlemaker Row are lit now, casting a warm amber light down the stone walls. The street is uneven underfoot, old stone worn smooth by centuries of foot traffic, and the buildings lean slightly toward each other overhead, the way old buildings do in this part of the city. You take another sip of cider. The warmth moves through you slowly. Bobby watches the street, the same as always, ears up, patient. The gate to Greyfriars Kirkyard is low and iron, and the sound of the street drops away almost the moment you pass through it. It's quieter in here, not silent. There are other visitors, moving slowly between the stones, but the noise of the city feels far off, like it belongs to a different place entirely. The graves are old, some of them very old. The headstones lean at angles, worn smooth in places. The inscriptions faded to near illegibility. Lichen has crept across many of them, in patches of grey and pale green. The grass between the stones is uneven, soft underfoot in places where the ground dips. You step carefully. The kirkyard has been here since the 1500s. The church itself, Greyfriars Kirk, stands at the far end, its stone facade solid and plain. This is where the National Covenant was signed in 1638, a document that shaped the course of Scottish religious history. The ground holds a lot of that weight. Robert Burns, the poet who gave Scotland Auld Lang Syne and much else, once wrote that the proper way to hasten the end of error is not by force, but to wait patiently and leave room for truth to work. Standing here among stones that have outlasted almost everything, that thought settles in a particular way, you move deeper into the yard. The light is fading now, the sky above the rooflines going a darker shade of blue. A lantern near the church wall has come on, casting a small warm circle on the path. The air is cooler here than it was on the street, damp, faintly earthy, the smell of old grass and stone. You keep walking. The stones go on in every direction, row after row, some upright, some tilted, some nearly flat with the ground. A crow lands on one of them, looks around and flies off again. Somewhere behind the church wall, a branch moves in the wind. The kirkyard is quiet now. The gravestones here are old, some so weathered, the letters have nearly dissolved back into the stone. Moss fills the carved grooves. Lichen spreads in slow grey patches across the faces of the markers. The ground is uneven, soft in places, and the grass grows long around the bases of the oldest slabs. What makes this corner of Greyfriars Kirkyard unusual is that J.K. Rowling is said to have walked here while writing the Harry Potter books, and some of the names on these stones found their way onto the page. There is a Thomas Riddell buried here, a William McGonagall, names that will sound familiar if you know the stories. Whether she borrowed them deliberately, or they simply lodged somewhere in her memory, no one can say for certain, but the stones are real, and the names are there, and it gives the place a strange double quality. Very old, and somehow also very recent. The young couple from the grass market moves slowly between the markers ahead of you, voices low. She stops at one stone and reads the name aloud. You can't quite catch it from here, just the shape of the sound. He leans in close to see. There's no hurry between them. They've been walking for a while now, and it shows in the easy way they move, close but not quite touching, pausing when something catches their eye. You hear her say, just audible, "Do you think anyone still comes to visit them?" A beat, then his voice quieter. "We did just now, that counts. The smell here is damp earth, and old stone, and something faintly green. The moss, maybe, or the grass. It's not unpleasant. It's the smell of a place that has been left mostly alone. Somewhere beyond the kirkyard wall, the city continues. A car, a distant voice. But inside the gate it feels separate, muffled. The light is fading at the edges of the sky and the stones cast long, thin shadows across the grass. A crow lands on a nearby marker, looks around and flies off again. You watch it go. The path rises ahead of you, stone underfoot, the gradient pulling at your legs just slightly. This is Castle Hill, the uppermost stretch of the Royal Mile, and the castle is close enough now that you can feel the shift in the air. It's cooler up here. The wind comes in off the ridge and moves through the gap between the buildings with a low, steady pressure against your face and hands. The smell of something warm drifts from a doorway to your left. Wood smoke, maybe, or the tail end of something baked earlier in the day. It's faint, but it's there. The stone walls on either side are dark with age, the kind of dark that comes from centuries of weather rather than neglect. You run a hand along one as you pass. It's rough and slightly damp, gritty under your fingertips. The street is quieter here than it was down in the grass market. Fewer shops, fewer voices. The buildings press in a little on either side, and the castle rock rises above the roofline ahead, massive and dark against the evening sky. You can't quite see the battlements yet, but you know they're there. You stand there for a moment, looking up the hill. The castle rock is volcanic, formed by an ancient eruption, then shaped over centuries into a fortress. People have lived and fought and died on that rock for over 1,000 years. From here, it just looks enormous. The wind picks up again as the street opens slightly. You keep walking, hands in your pockets, the cold working at your collar. The warmth from the cider earlier is still faintly there, somewhere in your chest. Above the roofline, the first stars are beginning to show. The esplanade opens wide in front of you, a broad, flat expanse of stone and gravel that stretches toward the castle gate like a pause before something begins. The grandstands line both sides, their tiered wooden scaffolding rising in long rows, empty now, their frames dark against the evening sky. During the Edinburgh military tattoo each August, these seats fill with thousands of people watching pipes and drums perform on this very ground. Tonight they stand quiet. The wind moves through the metal struts with a low, hollow sound. Not quite a whistle, more of a hum. The stone beneath your feet is wide and flat here, different from the uneven cobbles of the Royal Mile below. Your footsteps sound different too, more open, less contained. The esplanade was built up in the 18th century to give the castle a proper ceremonial approach, and you can feel that intention in the scale of it. There's a lot of sky. A few other visitors move across the space in small clusters, their voices carried sideways by the wind before disappearing. A flag snaps sharply somewhere above. You hear it before you see it. A crack and flutter against the grey blue of the sky. The castle rock rises directly ahead, volcanic basalt that has been here for hundreds of millions of years. The walls built on top of it look almost modest by comparison. The air up here is cooler than it was on the street below. You feel it on your face and the backs of your hands. Somewhere behind you the city drops away. Rooftops, spires, the long spine of the Royal Mile. But up here, there's just the open ground and the gate ahead and the wind doing its steady, indifferent work. You pull your coat a little tighter. The grandstands creak once, softly, as a gust moves through them. Then it's quiet again. Through the gate, Edinburgh Castle rises around you now, not as a postcard, but as something solid and old and very real. The stone is dark, almost black in places where the evening has settled into it, and the walls are thick enough that you feel the temperature drop as you pass through the gatehouse into the inner courtyard. The ramparts open out to the west, and from here the city spreads below in every direction. Rooftops and spires, and the long dark ridge of Arthur's Seat in the distance, the last pale light of the sky, still holding above the horizon. It is the kind of view that stops conversation. Robert Louis Stevenson, who grew up in Edinburgh, once wrote that it is a city that seems to have been built to be looked at. And standing here, you understand exactly what he meant. The stone wall at the rampart edge is rough under your hands, cold now, the chill of it working into your palms. The wind up here is steadier than it was on the esplanade, not sharp, but persistent, moving through the gaps in the battlements with a low, even sound. Below, the city lights are beginning to come on, one by one, amber and white, filling in the dark spaces between buildings. The young couple from the kirkyard is here too, standing close at the rampart wall. He goes quiet beside her, not the quiet of someone distracted, something more settled than that, as if the view has brought something into focus for him. She leans her head briefly against his shoulder. Neither of them says anything for a moment, then she straightens, and they turn together toward the warmth of the inner ward. The smell of damp stone follows you in. The castle has been occupied in some form for over 1,000 years. Garrison, royal residence, prison. The rock it sits on is volcanic, the remnant of an ancient eruption, and you can feel the age of it in the way the ground is uneven underfoot, worn into shallow dips by centuries of boots. The walls absorb the last of the light. It is almost fully dark now. The cannon fires at 1 o'clock precisely. You hear it before you feel it. A single enormous crack that rolls across the castle rock and out over the city below. Then the pressure of it arrives, a brief concussive thud in your chest, and then it's gone. Just the echo, bouncing off the stone walls of the Half Moon Battery, fading out toward the Firth of Forth. The 1 o'clock gun has fired from Edinburgh Castle every day since 1861. Every day except Sundays, Good Friday and Christmas. It was originally a time signal for ships in the Firth, so their navigators could set their chronometers without sailing into port. The gun itself, a modern 105mm field gun, sits on a low platform at the battery wall, its barrel still angled slightly skyward. A few visitors nearby flinch at the sound, even though they knew it was coming. Someone laughs, the involuntary kind. the kind that happens when your body reacts before your brain does. The battery wall opens out to one of the widest views in the city. To the north, the new town stretches in its Georgian grid, pale stone in the last of the evening light. Beyond it, the Firth of Forth is a dark line at the horizon. To the south and east, the old town falls away in layers, rooftops, spires, the long spine of the Royal Mile descending toward Holyrood. You stand at the wall for a moment. The wind up here is steady and cool, pressing against your jacket. The young couple is here too, close to the battery railing. She's pointing something out in the distance, a hill beyond the rooftops, and he's leaning in to follow the line of her arm. You catch a fragment. That must be Arthur's seat, right? The big one? He nods, though he doesn't look entirely certain. The smoke from the gun has already dispersed. The air smells faintly of it, something sharp and mineral, but it's clearing fast in the wind off the Forth. Below the battery, the city carries on. A bus moves along a street far down the hill. A gull tilts past, level with the rampart. Indifferent. The sound of the shot is already gone, absorbed into the ordinary noise of the afternoon. And yet for a moment everything felt very still. The echo of the gun is still somewhere in your chest. That flat, percussive thud that rolls out across the city and then is gone. Now the castle draws you deeper in. You move away from the battery and follow the path up toward the inner ward, the oldest and highest part of the rock. The ground underfoot is uneven, worn stone flags, slightly damp, the kind of surface that makes you watch your step without quite thinking about it. The walls on either side are thick and close. You run a hand along one as you pass, cold, gritty, the kind of cold that has been there for centuries and isn't going anywhere. The path rises, your calves feel it. The wind up here has an edge to it, not violent, just persistent, the kind that finds the gap between your collar and your neck and stays there. Somewhere behind you, a door swings on a hinge and catches with a dull clank. Footsteps on stone, a child's voice high and clear, asking something, then quiet again. And then Crown Square opens up in front of you. It's larger than you might expect. A proper courtyard, enclosed on all sides by stone buildings. The Great Hall to your left, the Palace block ahead, the Scottish National War Memorial to the right. The square itself is paved, and in the evening light the stone has a grey-blue quality, almost like slate. A few other visitors move slowly around the edges. No one is rushing. The wind crosses the open space without obstruction, and you feel it properly now. A clean, high-altitude cold that carries the faint promise of rain. You stand for a moment in the middle of it. The buildings around you are not decorative. They are solid and purposeful, built to last, built to hold things worth keeping. The Great Hall dates back to the early 1500s, constructed under James IV. The palace block is older still in parts. These walls have been standing while the city below grew up around the rock, street by street, century by century. She says something. You catch the tail end of it, something about the scale of the place, how it feels different from the outside. You nod. It does. From Prince's Street, the castle is a silhouette, a shape against the sky. Up here, it's just stone and wind and the sound of your own footsteps. The light is fading at the edges of the square. The buildings hold the last of it along their upper courses, a pale, cool glow just below the roof lines. Down in the city, the lamps will already be on. Crown Square surrounds you, wide, flat, and surprisingly still after the climb. The stone underfoot is worn smooth in the middle, where centuries of feet have crossed it, and the buildings that ring the square are heavy and dark, their walls thick enough to muffle the wind. The Great Hall stands on the south side. It's older than almost anything else up here, built in the early 1500s for James IV, used for parliaments, for banquets, for the business of a kingdom. From the outside, the long row of windows gives it away, tall, arched, letting in what light there is. Inside, the ceiling is the first thing you notice. A hammer beam roof, the kind where the timber brackets jut out from the walls and carry the whole weight of the structure without a single central column. The wood is dark with age, carved at the joints, and it rises high enough that the upper reaches are in shadow even now. The walls are lined with weapons, pikes, halberds, swords arranged in careful patterns, their metal catching the low light. Some of them are centuries old, others are replicas, but it's hard to tell which is which from where you stand, and maybe that's the point. A large fireplace sits at one end, stone-framed and deep, the kind that would have needed a whole tree to fill it. The smell in here is old stone and something faintly woody, the beams maybe, or the floor. It's not unpleasant. It's the smell of a room that has been closed and closed again for 500 years. A few visitors move quietly along the walls, reading the small placards, tilting their heads back to look at the ceiling. One of them murmurs something to the person beside them. You catch only the tail end of it. Didn't expect it to be this big. You stand near the center of the hall and look up. The hammer beams fan out overhead, like the ribs of something enormous. The room is quiet, in the way that large stone rooms are quiet, not silent, but contained. Footsteps sound different here. Voices drop without anyone deciding to drop them. Outside, the wind moves across the esplanade. In here, you don't feel it at all. From the Great Hall, you step into a different kind of quiet. The honours of Scotland, the crown, the sceptre and the sword of state, are the oldest surviving crown jewels in Britain, and they sit here in the royal palace, behind glass, in a room that feels smaller than you might expect. That smallness is part of it. You are very close to them. The air in here is cool and still. There's a faint mineral quality to it. Stone and old metal and something faintly like dust sealed away for a long time. The room is dim by design, the light kept low to protect what is inside. Your eyes adjust slowly. The gold of the crown catches even this careful light and holds it. You reach out and let your fingertips rest against the stone wall beside the display. It is cold, smooth in some places, slightly rough in others, where the surface has worn unevenly over the centuries. The castle has stood here since the 12th century in some form, and the stone carries that age in its surface. The crown itself was last used at a coronation in 1651, Charles II, the last Scottish coronation on Scottish soil. After that, the honours were locked away, hidden during the Cromwellian occupation, and then simply forgotten. Sealed in a chest in this very palace for over 100 years, until Walter Scott, the novelist, campaigned to have the room opened. They found the chest in 1818, exactly where it had been left. The crown was still inside. There is something about that story that stays with you. A thing locked away, not lost, just waiting. Somewhere nearby you catch a low voice, a guide maybe, or just someone reading aloud from a panel. Returned to Scotland in 1996. That would be the Stone of Destiny, the ancient coronation stone, which sits in a separate case nearby. It is a plain block of sandstone, unadorned, and somehow more affecting for it. The couple ahead of you has stopped moving. They are just standing, looking, not saying anything. You stay a little longer than you planned. The doorway is low and plain, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. But you step through, and the room changes everything. The Scottish National War Memorial occupies what was once a barracks building, rebuilt after the First World War, and opened in 1927. It is not a museum exactly. It is something quieter than that, a place of record. Every Scottish man and woman who died in the 2 world wars, and in conflicts since, is named here, in volumes of remembrance housed in a central shrine. The stone walls rise around you, carved with figures and symbols, soldiers, nurses, animals that served alongside them. The craftsmanship is extraordinary in the way that things made with grief tend to be. You find yourself moving slowly, not because the space demands it, but because hurrying feels wrong. Your footsteps are almost silent on the stone floor. Light comes in through stained glass windows, muted now in the evening, the colors reduced to deep blues and greens and a low amber. The effect is less brightness than atmosphere, a kind of filtered stillness. The air is cool and very still. You can hear almost nothing from outside. The thick castle walls hold the noise of the world at a distance. At the center of the memorial stands the shrine itself, a casket of steel set into the rock of the castle, the natural stone of the hill left exposed behind it, as if the building grew from the ground rather than being placed upon it. It is a deliberate choice. The rock is part of the design. Scotland itself, the architects seem to say, is the foundation of this grief. A few other visitors move through the space. No one speaks above a murmur. You catch a fragment from somewhere nearby, a low voice, just 2 words. So many. Then quiet again. You stand for a moment near one of the carved panels. The figures are detailed: a horse, a pigeon, a dog. The animals are remembered here too, listed among the dead. There is something in that which is hard to name. You look at it for a while, then you move on. Hospital Square opens up around you, a wide, flat courtyard tucked inside the castle walls, quieter than the spaces you've just passed through. The buildings here are lower, more functional looking, stone walls on all sides, a few lanterns beginning to glow as the last of the evening light drains from the sky. The National War Museum of Scotland sits along one edge of the square. It's a long, plain building, not grand in the way the memorial was, but solid and purposeful. A sign above the entrance is simple. Inside, the museum holds centuries of Scottish military history, uniforms, weapons, letters home, medals worn by people whose names most visitors will never know. You linger in the square for a moment. The stone underfoot is uneven in places, worn smooth by centuries of foot traffic. Soldiers drilling here, horses crossing, supply carts rattling through. Now it's just the two of you, and a handful of other visitors, moving slowly in the cooling air. Someone nearby pulls their jacket tighter. The temperature has dropped another degree or two since you left the memorial. There's a vendor near the far edge of the square, a small cart, steam rising from it in thin curls. You drift toward it without really deciding to. 2 cups of mulled cider, handed over warm. The first sip is sweet and spiced, cinnamon, clove, something faintly orange, and the heat of it moves straight down into your chest. The cup itself is almost too hot to hold comfortably, but you hold it anyway. She wraps both hands around hers and takes a slow sip. You catch a few words. This is exactly what I needed. And she's right, it is. The square is still. A gust moves through from the direction of the esplanade, carrying the faint smell of cold stone and wood smoke. The lanterns along the museum wall have come fully on now, casting a low amber light across the courtyard. The sky above the castle walls has gone a deep flat blue. Not quite dark, but close. The stone corridor is narrow here, and the ceiling is low. This part of Edinburgh Castle has a different weight to it. Not the grandeur of the Great Hall, or the solemnity of the War Memorial, but something quieter and more confined. These rooms held prisoners of war for centuries. French soldiers during the Napoleonic Wars, American sailors captured during the War of Independence, men from across Europe who spent months or years within these walls, waiting for a conflict to end. The walls are thick, several feet of volcanic rock between you and the outside air. You can feel it in the temperature, which drops noticeably as you move deeper in. The stone is rough under your fingertips, and in places you can still make out faint carvings left by the prisoners themselves. Names, dates, small drawings scratched into the surface with whatever came to hand. Some of the carvings are surprisingly detailed. A ship, a coat of arms, initials paired together. Small acts of marking time, of saying, I was here. At its peak, the castle held over 1,000 prisoners in these lower vaults. They slept in hammocks stacked in rows, traded handmade goods with the guards, and carved model ships from beef bones to sell to Edinburgh locals who came to watch them work. Some of those bone models still exist in museum collections today. You stand still for a moment. The sounds from the rest of the castle, footsteps, distant voices are muffled here. It's the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. Somewhere behind you, you catch a murmured exchange. How long were they actually kept here? And then lower. Years. Some of them. Years. The words hang there for a moment. The carvings in the wall catch the light at a low angle. One set of initials, deep and deliberate, sits just at eye level. No date beside them. No way to know who made them, or when, or whether they ever went home. You trace the edge of one letter with your finger without pressing in. The stone is cold. A narrow path leads you to one of the quieter corners of the castle, and one of the most unexpected. Mons Meg sits here, enormous and still. The cannon is one of the largest medieval siege weapons ever made, forged in the 1400s and gifted to the Scottish crown. Up close, the scale of it is hard to take in. The barrel is wide enough that you could almost climb inside, the iron dark and pitted with centuries of weather. It doesn't look like a museum piece. It looks like something that has simply been here a very long time and has no intention of moving. The stone around it is cold to the touch, even through a sleeve. The wind comes in off the battlements here, steady and direct, carrying the faint smell of damp grass from somewhere below the walls. You pull your jacket a little tighter. Just beyond Mons Meg, almost hidden behind a low wall, is the dog cemetery. It's small, barely a few square meters, and easy to miss if you're not looking. But there it is, a row of tiny headstones, each one marking a regimental dog, a garrison pet, a companion to soldiers stationed here over the years. The inscriptions are worn but legible. Names like Dobler, Fyvie, Jess. Dates stretching back into the 1800s. Someone carved each one carefully. Someone thought it mattered. The air here has a particular stillness to it. Not silence exactly. The wind is still moving, and somewhere behind you there are footsteps on stone. But the cemetery itself feels set apart. The grass between the headstones is very green and very short. A few of the stones have small offerings left beside them. A pebble, a dried flower, something you can't quite make out. You stand there for a moment longer than you expected to. There's something about the smallness of the stones against the scale of everything else. The cannon, the castle walls, the city spread out below, that makes you go quiet. The taste of the cold air sits at the back of your throat. You breathe it in, then you turn back toward the path. The castle is behind you now. You turn, and the Royal Mile stretches out ahead, long and straight and downhill. The whole of Edinburgh's old town, laid out in front of you like a slow exhale. The stone buildings on either side rise 4 and 5 stories, their facades dark with age, windows lit amber against the evening sky. The street is wide here at the top, wider than you expected, and the wind comes through with some force, not cold enough to stop you, but enough to make you pull your collar up. It moves through the gaps between buildings, through the narrow closes that branch off left and right, and you can hear it, a low, steady sound that rises and falls. This stretch is called Castle Hill. The very top of the Royal Mile, the section closest to the castle gate. The Royal Mile itself runs almost exactly a Scots mile from the castle down to the palace of Holyrood House, and Castle Hill is where it begins, or ends, depending on which way you're walking. You're walking down. The pavement here is broad and mostly clear. A few other visitors move in the same direction, hands in pockets, heads slightly bowed against the wind. Someone stops to take a photograph back toward the castle, the gatehouse lit up behind them. The stone underfoot is worn smooth in the middle of the path, where feet have passed for centuries, and rougher at the edges, where it meets the walls. You notice the difference when you step to the side. The grip changes. To your left, a close cuts sharply into the dark between 2 buildings. You can't see where it goes. The wind moves through it with a low, hollow note. To your right, the roofline drops away, and you catch a glimpse of the city below. Rooftops, a church spire, the orange glow of street lamps spreading out into the distance. She says something. You catch the tail end of it. Didn't realize it was this steep. He laughs, and they keep moving. The sound of their footsteps mixes with yours on the stone. High Street opens up ahead of you, wide and long, the spine of the old town running straight toward the horizon. The buildings on either side rise several stories, their facades a mix of dark stone and lit windows, some with painted signs, some with iron brackets holding lanterns that throw warm circles onto the pavement below. It's evening now, and the street has settled into a different rhythm. Fewer tourists moving fast, more people drifting, stopping, looking up. Near a small stall set back against the wall, a vendor is selling Scottish tablet, a confection that looks like fudge but isn't quite, grainier, drier, and far sweeter. A small square pressed into your hand from a paper bag, and it dissolves slowly on your tongue in a rush of butter and condensed milk, leaving a faint caramel warmth behind. You eat it in 2 bites. You want another piece immediately. The smell of the street here is layered, something fried from a nearby close, a trace of wood smoke from somewhere higher up the hill, and underneath it all, the cold, clean air that comes off the stone when the temperature drops. The buildings hold the cold. You can feel it radiating off the walls if you walk close to them. A few shop fronts are still lit, a tartan goods shop with bolts of fabric stacked in the window, a bookshop with a handwritten sign in the door. Across the street, a couple pauses to look at a menu posted outside a restaurant. You catch a fragment. But I had that last time. I want to try something different. Before they push through the door and the sound cuts off, The Royal Mile stretches ahead, the stone underfoot polished down the center by centuries of foot traffic, rougher and darker at the edges. You notice the difference when you step to the side to let a group pass. Somewhere above, a window is open, a light is on inside, and the faint sound of a television drifts down. Ordinary, domestic, completely at odds with the age of the building it's coming from. You keep walking. A narrow close opens off the high street, just a gap between two stone buildings, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. This is James Court, one of Edinburgh's old tenement closes, and stepping into it feels like stepping out of the city entirely. The noise of the street drops away almost immediately. Your footsteps sound different here, closer, more contained, bouncing off the walls on either side. The stone is dark and slightly damp, the kind of damp that lives in places that rarely see direct sun. A single lamp throws a pool of amber light across the close's entrance, and beyond it, the courtyard opens up into something quieter still. James Court has been here since the 1700s. David Hume, the philosopher, lived here once. So did James Boswell, the writer who documented Samuel Johnson's famous tour of Scotland. You wouldn't know it from looking. There are no grand plaques, no ceremony, just old stone and the faint smell of moss and cold air. The courtyard itself is small. A few windows glow from the flats above, warm rectangles of light against the dark facade. Someone has left a bicycle leaning against the far wall. A window on the second floor is cracked open, and from it drifts something faint. A radio, maybe, or a television. A voice, then music, then quiet again. You notice the couple just ahead of you have slowed down. He's pointing upward at something, one of the upper windows, or maybe the roofline, where the buildings crowd together and leave only a thin strip of darkening sky visible above. She tilts her head back to look. You catch a few words. Do you think people actually live up there? Before their voices drop again. The smell here is distinct. Old stone, a trace of wood smoke from somewhere above, and underneath it all, something faintly mineral. The smell of a city that has been standing in the rain for centuries. It's not unpleasant. It's just old. A cat appears from behind the bicycle, considers you briefly, and disappears through a gap in the wall. The close narrows again at the far end, leading back out toward the street. The lamp behind you is the only light now. The courtyard holds its quiet. Back on the high street now, the close behind you releases its cool air, and the wider road opens up around you. The wind comes first, a low, steady push from the west, funneled down the length of the Royal Mile, pressing against your jacket, finding the gap at your collar. It is not unpleasant, just present, a reminder that you are on a ridge, and the city falls away on both sides. The sound here is layered, footsteps on stone, some quick, some slow, a bus somewhere below, its engine dropping to idle, voices from a pub doorway, a burst of laughter that cuts off as the door swings shut again, then quiet, then footsteps again. The high street at this hour has a rhythm to it, not frantic, not empty, just the ordinary movement of people who are somewhere between where they were and where they are going. You pass a street musician near the edge of the pavement, a young man with a guitar, case open at his feet, playing something slow and unhurried. A few coins catch the lamplight at the bottom of the case. He doesn't look up. The notes drift out across the stone and fade before they reach the far side of the street. The couple ahead of you slow their pace as they pass him. She tilts her head slightly, listening. Then they move on. The stone beneath your feet is uneven in places. The surface worn down the center where the traffic is heaviest, harder and rougher toward the walls. Centuries of feet have done that. You are just the latest. The buildings on either side rise tall, the old tenements of the old town, stacked up because there was nowhere else to go. Some windows are lit from inside, warm yellow squares against the dark stone. A curtain moves in one, someone looking out, or just the draft. The wind picks up again, briefly, and then settles. The street stretches ahead, the lanterns spaced evenly along it, each one casting a small circle of amber on the ground below. Cockburn Street, locals say it Cockburn, and now you know, curves away from the Royal Mile in a long sweeping arc, dropping steeply down toward Waverley. The street is narrow, and the buildings press close on both sides, their facades a mix of dark stone and painted shop fronts. Warm light spills from the windows of record shops, vintage clothing stores, a small cafe with its door propped open. The smell of incense drifts out from somewhere, cedar maybe or sandalwood, mixing with the cooler air coming up from the valley below. The curve of the street means you can only see so far ahead. The rest disappears around the bend, and there's something satisfying about that. The next stretch reveals itself only as you walk toward it. The stone here is dark and slightly damp-looking, the way Edinburgh stone often is in the evening. Wrought iron railings line the upper edge of the street. A few lanterns are mounted on the walls, casting small pools of amber light that don't quite reach each other, leaving gaps of shadow in between. A couple passes you going the other way, the woman carrying a paper bag from one of the shops, the man reading something off his phone. You catch a fragment. No, it closes at 9. I already checked. And then they're gone, swallowed by the curve behind you. Somewhere below, a busker is playing. Fiddle, it sounds like. The notes climbing up the hill in pieces, arriving slightly out of order. You hear the end of a phrase before the beginning of the next one. It's a reel, fast and bright, and it echoes off the stone in a way that makes it sound like there are two of them playing. The street continues its descent. The buildings on either side are Victorian Gothic, built in the 1860s, designed to look older than they are, which in Edinburgh is saying something. They pull it off. The turrets and carved stonework catch the lantern light and hold it. You keep walking. The fiddle fades. The smell of incense gives way to something cooler. Night air, stone, the faint trace of rain that hasn't fallen yet. Calton Hill rises above the city, and by the time you reach the top, the lights of Edinburgh have spread out below you in every direction. Amber street lamps, the lit windows of tenements, the dark spine of the Royal Mile, threading back toward the castle. The air up here is colder. You feel it on your hands first, then on your face. The wind has a different quality on the hill, less sheltered, more honest. Somewhere near the old stone columns of the National Monument, the unfinished Greek temple that has stood here since 1822, sometimes called Edinburgh's disgrace, for never being completed, a lantern has been set on the ground, casting a warm circle of light on the pale stone. The columns rise up into the dark above it, enormous and pale and very still. You find a spot and sit with it for a moment. Someone nearby has cracked open a can of Edinburgh, the Scottish soft drink, that improbable bright orange, and passes it over. The can is cold enough to sting your fingers. The taste is hard to place, sweet, slightly medicinal, with a fizz that catches at the back of your throat. It's unmistakably itself. Drinking it on a hill in the dark, looking out over the city lights, feels exactly right. Charles Dickens, who visited Edinburgh and was struck by it, once wrote, "What a place Edinburgh is! What a city! What a world of contrasts!" The very stones seem to speak of history. Standing here, with the castle lit up to the west, and the Firth of Forth a dark glimmer to the north, it's hard to argue with him. The couple you've noticed since Grassmarket have drifted away from the other evening walkers. They're standing near one of the columns, just inside the lantern's circle of light. You're not watching, not exactly, but you notice when he says her name, just her name. She turns. You look away, out over the city. A moment passes, then you hear her laugh, bright and sudden, breaking open the quiet of the hill. You catch a few words drifting over. "I've been carrying this since Grassmarket." A pause. "Is that... are you..." And then quieter. "I am, if you'll let me." The wind moves through the columns. The city glitters below, indifferent and enormous. You take another sip from the cold can and let the moment be what it is. Dean Village arrives quietly. The path drops away from the city streets, and you find yourself descending toward the Water of Leith, the small river that cuts through Edinburgh's lower neighbourhoods, older and slower than the city above it. The stone buildings here are different, lower, rounder at the edges, their walls darkened by centuries of damp. Mill wheels once turned in this water. Grain was ground here for hundreds of years before the city expanded around it and moved on. The sound of the water reaches you before you see it, a low, steady rush over stones, constant and unhurried. It fills the space between the buildings and makes everything else feel further away. The lanterns along the path cast long reflections on the surface, orange and gold, shifting with the current. The air is cooler down here, noticeably so. It carries the smell of wet stone and river grass, and something faintly mossy from the walls. You pull your coat a little closer. The cobblestones, the old kind, rounded and uneven, a slick near the water's edge, and you step carefully. A stone bridge arches over the river ahead, low and plain, the kind that looks like it has always been there and always will be. A few lights glow in the windows of the buildings on the far bank. Someone has left a bicycle leaning against the bridge railing. Henry Cockburn, a Scottish judge and writer who knew this city intimately in the early 1800s, once wrote that he had passed all his days in Edinburgh and formed an attachment to his native city he could not easily describe. Standing here, in this quiet fold of the city, that feels right. Some places resist description. They just hold you for a moment. Behind you, somewhere on the path, you hear footsteps. Unhurried, close together. The couple from the hill. She's laughing softly at something, and then it goes quiet again. Just the river, and the lanterns, and the wet stone underfoot. You stand on the bridge for a moment and look down at the water. It moves steadily over the rocks, dark and glinting, indifferent to the hour. The city is up there somewhere. The castle, the Royal Mile, the closes and the crowds, but down here it is just the river, doing what it has always done. The walk is behind you now, the cobblestones, the lanterns, the cold air off the castle rock, all of it settling into something quieter. You don't need to hold on to any of it. Let the stone and the dark and the soft amber light go. Let the evening close over it, the way Edinburgh does, slowly without fuss. You were there, that counts. Thank you for walking with us tonight. This has been Walk Me to Sleep from Bears with Apps. Sleep well.